Good morning. So we're going to be starting chapter 4 today. And so we want to make sure that we've got all our vocabulary covered. So we're going to do some review of some vocabulary. So a polynomial in one variable can be written in this form. Now I know it looks a little bit scary, but all it's saying is like x to the 0 is just 1. So it's a constant, and then we've got something times x to the first times x to the second, all the way up until whatever letter that you want. So the a sub n and the a sub 0 represent just complex numbers. They could be real or imaginary. And so the first term can't be 0, and then n has to be greater than or equal to 0. So that means you can't have any negative fractions. So for example, rational numbers like 1 over x or 1 over x minus 2, that would not be a polynomial in one variable because your x is really to a negative integer. So like 1 over x is really x to the negative 1 power. So that's not a polynomial. Okay. So the degree of the polynomial is going to be the greatest exponent of its variable. And the leading coefficient is the coefficient of the variable of the greatest exponent. So you remember from chapter 3 when we talked about finding the horizontal asymptote, we said what is the degree of the numerator and the degree of the denominator? That's what we were talking about. And when they were the same, we took the ratio of the leading coefficients. And so the leading coefficient, again, is just the coefficient of the x value with the highest exponent. All right, so take a moment to pause the video and see if you could find the degree and the leading coefficient of each problem. So looking at the first one, I'm going to highlight the monomial that has the highest value or the highest exponent for a. And so what that tells me, since the highest exponent is 4, the degree is equal to 4. And then the leading coefficient is the number in front, and so the leading coefficient is 6. So if you got that wrong, take a moment to pause the video again and see if you can adjust what you do for number 2. So in number 2, if I highlight the monomial with the highest exponent for p, I would highlight this one. So that means that my degree is 3 because that's the highest exponent for p. And then the number in front is the leading coefficient, which is -2. So leading coefficient doesn't necessarily mean the coefficient at the front, it means the coefficient of the variable with the highest exponent. All right. So a 0 of a function, and this is a huge deal, it's the value of x for which the function, meaning the y value, is equal to 0. So it's also known as the x-intercepts. So this is an example that I put in your notes. So it says determine if 4 is a 0 of the function. And so what we would do is go ahead and plug 4 into the function. So what I want you to do is pause the video right now and go ahead and calculate that and see if you get f of 4 to be equal to 0. So I'm going to work this out step by step. So first we take care of the exponents. So 4 to the third is 64 and 4 to the second is 16. Then we take care of multiplying or dividing as we read from left to right. So 6 times 16 is 96 and 10 times 4 is 40. And then we start combining. So let's see, I think I combined my positives. So no, I didn't, I'm sorry. I did 64 minus 96 gives me -32, and 40 plus -8 gives me +32, and together they make 0. So we could say that it is a 0 of the function, and a 0 of the function is the same as saying the root of the function. So you're going to see the book say find the zeros of the function, find the roots of the functions. Those two mean exactly the same thing. So roots can be imaginary or complex, so we need to remember our pure imaginary numbers. So I is the square root of -1. We call that the imaginary unit. And so when I square a square root, I get the number inside. So I squared is -1. So then I cubed is the product of I and I squared. So we get -I. And then I to the 4th is equal to 1. So I'm going to show you a brand new way to think about this. So when I started teaching the MRWC class, the Math Reasoning with Connections, what we learned is that by multiplying by I It's really a rotation of 90 degrees counterclockwise on the complex plane. So on the complex plane, that means that the x-axis is representing all the real numbers and the y-axis is representing all the imaginary values. Okay, so a real value would be 1. So if I have I to the 0, I get 1 because any number to the 0 power is 1. So then if I multiply that by I, what I've done is rotated that 90 degrees counterclockwise, and I end up on the imaginary axis at positive I. So we just get positive I, or the square root of -1. And if I multiply that by I, getting me I squared, then I'm rotating that 90 degrees counterclockwise, and I get on the real axis, and that's at -1. So I squared is -1. And then when I multiply again, rotating on my axis, I end up on the imaginary axis, except on the negative side. So this is going to be -I. And then if I multiply again, I get I to the 4th, and that puts me back at 1. And so do you see that I to the 5th would put me at I to the 6th at -1, I to the 7th at -I, etc., etc. So we have a periodic rotation of 4 units. So if you can remember these 4 things, then you could remember any I value to any, or I to any power. All right, so coming back to our slide, always gives me trouble when I first start. Okay, so the sum or difference of a real number and a pure imaginary number gives us the complex numbers. So complex numbers can be written in the form of a plus bi, where the a and the b values are real numbers. So you can have 7 plus 3i, you could have 5 minus 4i, something like that. So if the b part is equal to 0, then all you're left with is the a, and we know that a is real. So a plus 0i is going to be a real number. If the a part is 0, then you get 0 plus bi, or just bi, and we call that a pure imaginary number. So if you take a look on page 206, it gives us the breakdown. And I know this looks kind of crazy, but I just want to kind of talk about it. So we have complex numbers, so they're made up of real numbers, pure imaginary numbers, and others. All right, so complex numbers could be 2 minus 3i, it could be real numbers, it could be integers, it could be anything. Complex numbers are anything we've ever talked about in math. So real numbers are anything that don't contain an I value, and pure imaginary numbers just contain an I and a coefficient. So there are other complex numbers, but pure imaginary is the one where the a is equal to 0. So within real numbers, we get split into 2 parts. So one is rational numbers. So rational means ratio, and so it's the ratio of 2 integers. So you can see that 2/3 is a ratio of 2 integers. You could call 7, 7 over 1. You could call 0, 0 over 1. And I think this is supposed to be 0.3 with the bar, and then I could change that into 1/3. So those are all examples that a terminating decimal and a repeating decimal would also be rational numbers. When we come over here to irrational numbers, literally the definition is anything that's not rational. So anything that I can't write as a fraction with an integer numerator and an integer denominator would be irrational. So like we said, within the rational numbers, you could have integers, because I can take any integer and put it over 1. And then you can have fractions, repeating decimals, and terminating decimals, because fractions, we can make them either proper or improper, and then you've got an integer over an integer. And then repeating decimals and terminating decimals, there are ways to turn those into fractions as well. So the integers are made up of the negative integers as well as the whole numbers. So whole numbers start at 0 and go up from there with no fractions or decimals in them. And then if you chop off 0, that gives you the natural numbers, or what we call the counting numbers. So where did you start counting when you were 3? You started with 1, and then 2, and then 3, and so on and so forth. So this is the breakdown of all the number systems. So the fundamental theorem of algebra says that every polynomial equation with a degree that's greater than 0 has at least one root in the set of the complex numbers. So the book has a slight error in it. It says that an even function can intersect the x-axis an odd number of times. I'm sorry. The book says it only has, let me repeat myself. I wanted to start the video over again, but there's no point. So the book does have a slight error. So as this says, an even function can intersect the x-axis an odd number of times if there is a square involved. So for example, if we look at x plus 1, I would have a 0 at x is equal to -1. But if you remember from Algebra 1 or Algebra 2, we called that something like a double 0 because -1 is a 0 for this function twice because it's squared. That's what I was trying to get across. All right, so here's this corollary. This is the bigger deal. And I know it looks kind of crazy in there, but what it's saying is whatever the degree of your polynomial is, that's exactly how many complex roots you have. So for example, degree of 1, I could cross at most one time. Notice it has to cross at least once unless it's a horizontal line, okay? But then that would not have an x to a positive power. That would be x to the 0. So a degree of 2, meaning you've got x squared, that can hit at most 2 times. So notice if I moved it up a little bit, I could hit it once because that 0 is a 0 double. Or I could move it up even further and hit it 0 times, which means that both of my roots are complex. So a degree of 3 would look something like this, and we hit the x-axis exactly 3 times. Or again, if we move it up a little bit and a little bit, we could get a double 0, or we could have 2 complex roots, but we're guaranteed 1 real root because of that end behavior that we talked about in chapter 3. So here we have an example of degree of 4, and here we have an example of degree of 5. So again, we hit as many times as we can hit as many times as the highest degree. Hit that x-axis. All right, so since the x-axis only represents real numbers, imaginary roots cannot be determined by using the graph. So the graph below has the general shape of a third-degree function and a fourth-degree function. And in the graph, a third-degree function crosses the x-axis at least once. So notice whether the loopy part is above the x-axis or below the x-axis, or from the previous slide exactly on the x-axis, you're going to have 3 solutions. So one of them has to be real because of our end behavior, but the other 2, if I'm not crossing the x-axis 2 more real times, that means I have 2 complex roots or imaginary. Coming over here in the previous slide, we hit that graph right across here and we had 4 solutions. But if we move it up a little bit, it could hit twice and have 2 real solutions and 2 imaginary solutions. It could hit a little bit, you brought the graph a little bit lower, it could hit 3 times because this one would hit as a double root. Or it could hit never, and that means that all 4 answers would be imaginary, or all 4 roots would be imaginary. So the graph of a polynomial function with an odd degree must cross the x-axis at least one time because the end behavior for odd looks like this, and there are no absolute maxes or absolute mins. So the graph of the function with an even degree may or may not cross the x-axis. And so this is where the error occurs. It says if it does, it'll cross an even number of times. But remember, you might have a double square. So it says each x-intercept represents a real root of the corresponding polynomial equation. So if you know the roots of the polynomial equation, you can use that corollary to the fundamental theorem of algebra to find the equation. So that is, if you know that a and b are roots of the equation, then the equation x minus a times x minus b equal to 0 is the equation of the polynomial.